But first, I just need to come back briefly to an issue I mentioned last night, something that really disturbs me. Yesterday, Victorian Labor Premier Dan Andrews abused Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister, for visiting in jail Cardinal George Pell, who's been convicted for child sexual abuse.
Shameful, frankly. Absolutely shameful. I apologise on his behalf, if he won't, to every victim who would have been traumatised to see the former Prime Minister of our country visiting a convicted child sex offender.
Now, I think there was something indeed shameful about that visit, but it wasn't the visit itself. Not at all. I mean, here was Tony Abbott visiting someone who's been a friend for decades and a friend now in the deepest need. Here was Abbott visiting a man he actually is convinced is innocent, as I do, a man that he hopes will win his appeal to the High Court. And you probably know I'm not a Christian, I'm agnostic, but I do want to point out a passage in the Bible that is actually one of the most important ones in it. It's one of the passages that has inspired so many people to act with mercy, to respect the humanity and the rights of every single person from the high to the low. It's in the Gospels. It's a parable where Christ said something that could civilise even Abbott's haters if they could open their ears and their hearts. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Now, I wonder how it can be shameful when Tony Abbott lives by those magnificent words of his Christ. Now, here's a key point. Abbott did his best to keep his visit to George Pell low-key. No press, no announcement. The idea was to just go in and out. Now, let me tell you what was truly shameful about his visit. Some anonymous person, some coward in the dark, tipped off Channel 7's state political reporter, Brendan Donoghue, that Abbott was seeing Pell. Now, Donoghue did his job as a journalist. He got to the prison in time to film Tony Abbott leaving it, and he put it on TV, thus making a private visit very public indeed.
Look, I was simply visiting a friend, that's all.
So, who tipped off? The media. Who breached the privacy of Tony Abbott and of George Pell? And why? Was it someone in the prison system to settle a score, maybe peddle a favour? Or did someone in the Labor government tip off Channel 7's political reporter? That would have been handy for the government, I'll tell you what. It needed something to deflect media attention away from the embarrassing news that Premier Dan Andrews had met and taken a donation from a property developer at the centre of a corruption inquiry. And Andrews sure grabbed this chance to damn Tony Abbott. Let's listen again to some of what he said, because I do want to call this out.
Apologise on his behalf, if he won't, to every victim who would have been traumatised to see the former Prime Minister of our country visiting a convicted child sex offender.
Oh, how many ways was that shameful? Well, look, first, is he suggesting that no convicted child sex offender, even one appealing that conviction, can ever get a visitor? Are we that lacking in mercy now? And if so, why are visits even allowed then, officially, even to murderers? Second, is Andrews saying that no private citizen may ever visit George Pell because victims of other pedophiles, not Pell himself, would be angry? You know, that kind of thinking feeds my suspicion that George Pell was convicted for the crimes of his church and not for anything he himself did. It's mob justice. And third, here is a Premier publicly prejudicing Pell's appeal to the High Court with his damnation. And all that is indeed shameful, Premier. And then there's this hypocrisy. If Premier Andrews is so angry that victims would have been traumatised to see this footage of Abbott visiting Pell, Why doesn't he order a hunt for the leaker, the person who tipped off Channel 7, thus ensuring it did get on TV for those victims to see and be traumatised by? Or would a search for the perpetrator be a little bit too embarrassing? Is the guilty person too shamefully close to this Labor government and its minions?